So in this lesson, we're going to look at HTML in a bit more detail. So HTML, hypertext markup language. So it's used for describing the structure. So it basically describes the structuring of the content in a web page. So every page is created using, at a minimum, what's called a HTML file or HTML code. So we're going to look at this in a little bit more detail now in the next couple of lessons. So specifically, we are going to look at HTML. So we're going to look at what HTML is. We're going to look at HTML IDEs. So IDEs are integrated development areas. So it's kind of like if you think about a Word document, you need Microsoft Word, for example, to edit a Word document. So if you want to work with HTML files, you need a HTML integrated development area. And there's different ones, but we're going to look at one particular one called VS Code. We're going to look at HTML basic elements, so some of the very basic elements that you need in order to build a website. And then we're going to do a little bit of a learning check at the end. So HTML, so websites need at a minimum a HTML file. So HTML, if we remember, stands for Hypertext Markup Language. The HTML file will contain HTML code. So this is an example of just a basic HTML file. So remember, we have elements. Elements make up, they're the building blocks, if you like, of HTML. So you have doctype HTML. So this doctype element tells the browser that this is a HTML document. This HTML, so you have this opening tag and this closing tag, tells you where the HTML code starts and where the HTML code ends. We have a title, okay, so HTML tutorial. So this is what will show up in the thumbnail when you open up that page. We have the body then. So we have this body element. So you have an opening tag and a closing tag. You can see this slash here. And inside the body you have a H1 element. This is a header, and then you have a paragraph element. This is a paragraph. So HTML file will contain HTML code like this. Now this is very simple HTML code, and websites are pretty complex. They'll contain a lot more code than this, but this is the basics of it. So you have a HTML file that contains HTML code. So IDE or an IDE, basically what they are is they're called integrated development environments. So these are kind of like where you write your HTML code. So it's kind of like if you think about if you want to write a letter, you use Word, for example, to type up a letter, if you want to write an email. So an IDE basically then is where you write the code. So it's called an integrated development environment. So within the lessons that will come, we're going to use what's called Visual Studio Code, and I will show you where you go to download that. There are other IDEs, one like Notepad++ for Windows, Text Wrangler for Mac operating systems, and there's also one as well that I'm going to show you on www.treeschools.com. There's one one that you can use online where you don't need to download anything. The one that we're going to use will be for most of the coding pieces, and this will be Visual Studio Code, and I use that one because it works on all operating systems. I'm going to be using it on Windows, but it works very well on all operating systems. So an IDE basically is the computer program that you use to write your HTML code. To download Visual Studio Code, just go into Google and go to this website, and it'll bring you onto this page, and then just click on download, and then you can follow the on-screen instruction and it'll get you set up in Visual Studio Code. Now also, just to give you kind of an idea of like how an IDE works. So if you log on to w3schools.com, so within this page you have this HTML section, and within it there's an online built-in integrated development environment that you can use to type up code and see how the code works. So when you go in here, so this here is code, for example, HTML, and if you just click on this, try it yourself, and it'll bring you into the IDE online environment. So when you click on it, it brings you into something like this. So basically on the left hand side, you have the space where you type in your code, and you can hit run up here. And then on the right hand side, this is how it gets displayed on your browser, for example. So you can see here we have some of the basic HTML elements, and we're going to be looking at more elements as we move through this course. But as we can see here, if we look down here at this, so this is a header tag. And what I can do is if I want, I can change this. I can change it, I can type in whatever I want. So I can say, for example, this is a header. And then I can type in, so I can type in, let's say even here, I could type in something like, so pet. So you can type in like a header, like pets, and then in here you can type in, for example, the types of pets that you can have. You can have cats, you can have dogs, you can have a fish, etc., etc. And then if you click on run here, what will happen is it'll run the code here. So this is really useful because you don't need to download anything. You can literally just log on. All you need is access to the internet, log on, and you can start typing in your HTML code in here, hit run, and it'll display it here. So when you download Visual Studio Code, this is kind of like what it looks like here. So on the left hand side you have a file structure section. So you can go in, and this is where you would save your file. So for example, if I want to work on a HTML file, so I can create a file. So this is an example HTML, example.html. So notice that it has the .html, which indicates that it is a HTML document. So what I can do is I can get rid of all this in here. And what I can do here is if I type in HTML, it'll bring up. So this here is like the basic, if you like, it's like a boilerplate for HTML. So it has all these basic elements. So this here is like when the browser loads up your HTML file, it'll start to look through this and it'll execute the code that's in this. So you have this doc type up here that it tells it's a HTML file. Here, this element tells the language. In the head, then we have information that's not necessarily displayed in the browser. Now, this title document this here is displayed in the tab section. And in here we have what's called the metadata, and we'll be looking at that in more detail as we go through the course. So you have all different types of metadata in here. In here you have the body element. So inside here it goes the body of your text, and then you have this HTML. So notice that you have HTML up here and this HTML closing tag here. So that encapsulates, if you like, all of the elements that make up the HTML document that you have created. So in here I can, if I want to run the code, so I can just, if we think about, so let's say I can put the title as pets, and then in the body here I want to put in my elements. So if we make a H1, so that's a header element, so and we can put in, so for example, pets, and then underneath this then I can write my, and again we're going to be looking at these elements. I can put in a paragraph element, so I just type P and it uploads it preloads the elements for you, so you don't have to type out everything. And in here I can put in, so for example, cats, dogs, and fish. Okay, and what I want to do, if I want to save it, then I can just press the control button and S. And then if I want to run this code in the browser, I can go up here to run, and I can click on run, and I can go to here, run code without debugging, like so. And what will happen then is it'll run this in a browser. So for example, it's running it here in Chrome. And let me just show you what this looks like. So notice here, so we have, so notice this is the tab, so pets, this is where this title is shown up here. We have the header, which is a header element, and then we have the cats, dogs, and fish, so that's typed here as well. And there's all different types of elements then we can start to put in, and we're going to learn about some of the basic elements. So that's just a quick introduction to what are called integrated development environments. So this is where, if you're a web developer or a coder, it's where you can write all your code. Now the good thing about this Visual Studio Code, you can use it to type up, you can write all different types of code like Python, like HTML, like CSS. So it's a kind of one-stop shop for coding and development, and it's very widely used in industry as well. Okay, so that's integrated development environments. Thank you for listening. So HTML, as we've mentioned, it describes the layout and format of a web page. So here's Visual Studio Code, and here's a piece of code that we put in. And when this code is run in a browser like Google or like Google Chrome, this is the output of it. So this here, if you like, is a basic, very, very basic web page. So in order to be able to produce this web page, we use this language called HTML, or Hypertext Markup Language. And it's called a markup language because it uses tags to define these things, what are called elements. And it doesn't use code blocks like Python. So Python, when we look at Python, we'll be looking at like blocks of code, whereas within HTML we use tags. So this shows the basic layout of a tag of a HTML, of, well, what's called a HTML element. And the HTML element is made up of what are called tags. So if you think about it, in the middle here you have the content. So this is HTML basics. And then either side of the content you have the HTML, what are called tags. And you normally have an opening tag and you have a closing tag. So for example, this whole thing here is what's called a header element. And the header element is made up of the opening tag, the closing tag, and then the content that's in the middle. So we use these brackets like so, and then we put in our HTML code in between these. So this is the basic structure of an element, and you will see this over and over and over as we start to work through and build some basic HTML web pages. So if we have a look here in VS, in Visual Studio Code, we can see here, so we wrote a very, very basic web page, and this is what the web page looks like. And again, if we have a look, just to emphasize the point that I've made here. So think about it. So here we have, so this here is the title element. Okay, so it's a title element. And if you notice, it has the opening tag and it has the closing tag. So notice that the closing tag has this slash through it like so. And then it has the content in the middle, which is pets. And this element here, it is what puts this section here, if you like, on the browser. So it gives a title, and in the title it gives the name, like so. So this is an example of an element. So if you think about a web page, is built up of these elements. So you have elements all connected together. Again, if we have a look here, so we have the head opening tag, we have the head opening tag, the head closing tag, and then everything that's in the middle is the content of this tag. The same here, if we look at, we have a header tag h1 and another header, the closing tag h1, and then the content in the middle, and that relates to this piece here, pets. And then we have what's called a paragraph tag, opening tag, closing tag, and then the content in the middle, and that's what gives us this information here. So we have the body opening tag, closing tag, and then that's the body element, and this is the content of the body element. So that's what we mean when we talk about HTML. Again, it's a markup language, and when we talk about tags, we are talking about this, if you like, piece of code that we attach to either side of content that we want to display. So if you really look at this, you have like the content. So the content is in the middle between the opening and closing tags. So what is the content? Pets, pets, and then this information here. Now this is very, very basic, but it's just to kind of give you the general idea of what we mean by what we mean by a HTML tag and what we mean by a HTML element and the parts of a HTML element. So you have the opening tag, closing tag, and then the content. And these opening and closing tags will be different depending on what the content is that you want to display. And we will learn all of the basic HTML tags that you would use to construct a web page. So when we think about web pages, like we have to kind of think about overall, like what is the purpose of a web page? So imagine you have went and you've carried out some research and you've done some research on a brief history of the internet, and this is what you've found. Okay, so you've summarized it in, you have a header, you have an image that you want to display, and then you have paragraphs that you want to display that contains what's called the content that you want to display. So you want to be able to take all this information, all this hard work that you've done, and you want to be able to show it off to millions of people all around the world. So you may be, when you're listening to this, you may be located here, but you want to easily be able to put this content somewhere that somebody over here, somebody over here, or somebody over here can just log on, go into the internet and go onto your website and look at this, a brief history of the internet that you've done loads of research on. So that's the reason why we want to display content. So generally what you're going to start to think about is you're going to think about, okay, this is the content. So this is the content that I want to display. And now what we have to think about is, like, what's the markup language or the tags that I have to put around this content so that I can display it in a browser like Google Chrome. And again, if we think about the basic layout of, so we have to think about what are the elements going to be that will be put together to make up my web page, for example. And we have to kind of think about it as well, like how are we going to lay it out and what's the style. But for now, we're going to just focus on just the basic, like how to arrange this content here on a web page. So we have to think about what are the fundamental tags that we need. So for example, so we want to think about the elements. So if we think about this here, so this section here, so this is going to be one element. Okay, if we think about this image here, so this is going to be another element. Okay, and then if we think about all of these paragraphs, so these are all going to be individual elements as well. So 1, 2, so these are all going to be elements, if you like, of our web page. So what we need to think about is we kind of need to, when we're designing our web page, we think about the content that we have, and then we think about how we're going to lay it out and how we're going to style it. Now we're going to just look at the basic bare bones structure with the HTML elements that we need. But again, if we want to go into even more detail, we might use things like style, for example, and style it in a particular way. And that's where we use CSS. But for today, we're going to focus on just using basic tags. So if we think about, if we break this down then into a web page, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We've 8 elements. Okay, so we have 8 elements like this. And then we have to think about, like, how are we going to display these elements? So we need to think about this first one here is going to be a header. So we're going to be using a header element. So the header element is H, and we're going to look at these in more detail, but H1. So that's the opening tag. And then this is the closing tag. So we have the opening tag, we have the closing tag, and then we have the content in the middle. To display the image, we're going to use an image tag. So it looks something like this, img. And this is what's called, now if you notice there's a slight difference between these two here. So this has an opening tag and a close tag, and then it has the content in the middle, whereas this just has just one tag. Now this is what's known as a void tag. And we also have this other void tag here as well, which is called a break. So we're going to need to use an image tag. Now for all of these, we're going to have to use a paragraph tag. So it begins with P, like so. So this is the opening tag, this is the content, and then this is going to be the closing tag, like so. Okay, and then we want to see these breaks in here. So we can, I'll just change this color. So we want to put in breaks here, so like so. So I'm going to put a break, a break, a break, break here, break here. Okay, so this is, if you like, this is very like a very basic design. So it's like a kind of design of a website. If you were a web developer, as in like you were writing the code for the website, you're not really worried so much about the content. Somebody will provide the content for you, and they'll give you like some kind of a schema that you want to follow, and then you will code it in. So this is, if you like, the basic design of a website. And you can think about it as, so you have all of the individual elements of the website, the parts of the website, the header, the image, the paragraphs, the breaks. The elements have a specific structure or a particular layout. They have an opening tag, a closing tag, and then the contents in the middle. So opening tag, closing tag, content in the middle. We have elements that are called void elements, so they just have like a tag, but they don't have an opening and closing tag, like this image element and like the break element here, like the break tag, should I say. And the rest then have, like, so for example, paragraph, you have an opening tag and you have a closing tag. So what we can do now is we have our content and we've come up with a very basic design. So we want to then go about, how do we go about coding this? How do we take this information and code it so that it can be displayed on a website, on the internet, in a browser like Chrome? And again, just to kind of recap, so the structure of the element is, you have the overall thing is the element, you have the opening tags, the content in the middle, the closing tags, and then you have void tags like these guys here. So what we'll do is we'll take this design and we will write up the code for the HTML code for this so that the website can display this information here. Okay, so what we're going to look at now is just building. So we've taken our content, we've got our content, and we've come up with a basic design. So what we want to do now is we want to build just a basic HTML web page to display the information. So if we have a look at this, so we're going to call it a brief history of the internet. So the first thing we want to do is we want to, inside here in our Visual Studio Code, we want to make a HTML file that contain the information. So we can go into this section here, we can right click it, and then we can put in new file, and we will call this a brief history. So a brief history of the internet, and we want to give it the extension .html, and this basically creates what's called a HTML file. So now what we want to do is we want to first of all put in the basic elements of a web page. So let's have a look at these here. So the first thing is this element here. This is what's called doc type HTML. So this just defines the document as a HTML document. So we can type in this. So doc type, notes the way a HTML, and that tells the browser that this is a HTML document. The next we want to do is, so we have to tell the browser where the HTML code starts and where it ends. So we use this HTML. So we have our opening tag and we have our closing tag. So it shows where the HTML code, where it starts and where it ends. And it's what's known as the root element. So we put this underneath this. Okay, so HTML. Okay, like so. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put all of our HTML code inside this. We have then the two sections. So we have a head section and a body section. So we'll put this in, so head. Okay, so that's our head section, and then we have our body section. So this body section will contain all of the elements that will display on the web page, and the head section contains all of the metadata. Now what we can start to do is we can start to take all of this information from our design, and we can start to put it into, we can start to put the elements into our HTML file. So the first thing we want to do is we want to give it a title. So we can type in title. So you have your title. Okay, so you're opening and closing title, like so. So you have your opening element, your closing element. And then in the middle of this, we want to put in a, so we'll call it history of the internet. And then we can click Control S to save that. Now what we do is we will just quickly run this. So if I go into, so in here and go to run and go run without debugging, like so. And then this will bring up our, it'll display the web page in the browser, like so. And notice here we have our first element that we've put in, history of the internet, and that's coming from this here, which is in the head section. The next thing we want to do is we want to put in a header, a brief history of the internet. So we want to take this piece here, this element here, and we want to display it somewhere around here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put all of this content that we want to display in the browser, we put this in the body section. So we're going to type in, so we want a header element, so h1 element, like so. And notice we have our opening and closing tags, and then we want to take this, a brief history of the internet. And I can just copy and paste this from a Word document that I have this information in. So we'll just put that in here like so. Control V, and we want to save it like so. And now what we want to do is we want to refresh the page, and notice there that we have this, a brief history of the internet. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. So underneath this then we want to take this image and we want to put it in underneath here. So what we want to do is we want to use the image tag. So it looks something like this. And the image tag has these attributes or properties. So the source SRC is the location where your image is stored. So I have the image here stored here. So we want to put in that image there. So image. So internet. .png. And then this here is just what will display if the browser can't find the image. Okay, so image of the internet. We want to save this. And then notice that when we run it then, we have the image here. Okay, so we have this, so this is our HTML file, and then these are our images here, and we have them saved in the same folder, and therefore it will display here. If it was a case that the browser wasn't able to find this image, it would display this text instead. Now if we think about what are the next things we want to put in, so we want to include these paragraphs here. So we want to include paragraph elements. So again, we put in our paragraph elements, so we just use P like so. So notice that we have an opening tag, a closing tag, and then in the middle you'll have the content. And we want to put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we want to put in 6 of them. So we can just copy, select the whole lot, copy, and then we want to put it so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like so. And then we want to press Control and S just to save our paragraphs. And I have these paragraphs saved in a Word document where I've done my research on the internet. So I want to take out each of these and put them in. So I want to copy the content that I want to display and I want to put it in each of them. So I'll just copy this from a Word document here where I have it saved. And I want to put it in between the two open and closing tag. So I'll just paste it in like so. Now see the way this, like the contents goes off the page. So if you go up here into View and then go to Word Wrap, what it'll do is it'll wrap the word, it'll wrap it like that. So that's our first paragraph. So we want to put in the other paragraphs as well. So I've copied and pasted in all of the paragraphs like so. So we have our image, we have our header, we have each of the paragraphs now as well. So we want to control and save all of that, and then we want to refresh. Click this button here to refresh the browser. And then if we open up the browser, we can see that we have our paragraphs being displayed in there. Now, what we want to include then is this void or break element to increase the space between these paragraphs here. So there is some space, but we want to increase that space. So what we can do is between, so let's say, so this is where one paragraph starts and where it ends. Okay, so that's the opening tag and that's the closing tag, and this is the content. So between that, we want to put in these break elements, like so, and we can copy these. I'll just copy this, Control and C, and we want to put them in between each of these paragraphs just to increase the space between them. And we'll just put one at the bottom here as well, just to keep it even. We want to Control and C, and then if we hit refresh, and we have a look, so you can see here it gives us nice big space between each of the paragraphs. So this is our, if you like, our basic web page, and it's just a basic HTML page. So there's nothing fancy on it. We have a header, we have an image, and we have paragraphs. This is the HTML code that we need in order for the web browser to be able to display this information that we've taken from the internet. And you can see here that we have all this information here. So we've gone from the research and this basic design to the actual typing it up or typing the code, and then we have a basic web page. And then if we think about just the bit, so this is just the basic structure of a web page. So you have the dot type. So again, this goes up here at the top, up here, and that just tells us that it tells the browser that this is a HTML document. You have the HTML open and closing tags, this HTML element. So it starts here, if you like, and I can close this, and it ends here. And all the content, all the HTML content is in between that. So we have the header section up here. So the header contains all of the metadata about the page. It's generally the stuff that doesn't display in the, let's say, the body of the page. But we have this information up here, like the name of the tab, for example. And we have that in as a title. So we have a title opening element, or opening tag and closing tag, and this whole thing makes up a title element. Then we have the body. So the body, if you like, so this is the opening tag for the body, and then down here is the closing tag for the body. So the closing tag for the body down here. So inside the body we have all the paragraphs, and we have the breaks, and we have the image, and we have the header that we want to display. So inside the body, inside these body tags contains, let's say, the body of the web page basically. So if we take this here, this is like what displays on the actual page itself. So this is known as the body of the web page. And that's just, again, we're going to be looking at these in more detail, these individual tags, and looking at all of this in more detail. But again, this is our IDE, Visual Studio Code. These are this is the basic, let's say, the basic elements that you need in order to display a web page. There's a lot more tags and things that we can put in, and this is the general kind of file structure that we use when we create our HTML file. So if the HTML file has the .html extension on it, and it contains all the HTML code, and you can think about the HTML code as like the bone structure, if you like, of the web page. It contains the basic things that we need to put in order just to display it. And we just looked at some simple common tags like image tags, header tags, and paragraph tags, and we will look at more in some more detail. So that's the basic web page. So basic web page structure of a HTML web page. That's the basic structure of it, using this IDE Visual Studio Code to create it. Okay, thank you for listening. So here are some of the common HTML elements, and we will look at each of them in turn, and we have looked at some of them already when we built our little web page there previously. So here is our HTML code that we wrote previously that looks at the particular website. So we looked at the basic structure of the HTML code and what you need. So you have the doc type, you have the HTML opening and closing tag, and then you have the header and body section. Now if we take each of these elements, so let's have a look at each of them. So the first one is the H1 element, or the header element. Now this header element, it ranges from 1 to 6. So what does that mean? It means that we have different sizes of headers. So if we have a look at our code, so we have this piece of code here. So this is an example of the use of this header. And when we use this code, this is how it shows up on the web page. Okay, so this up here is a H1 header. Now this value ranges from 1 to 6. So what I can do is I can change this just to kind of give you an idea. So if I copy and paste this, so copy, and I will paste some of these in here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, and let's put just one more in just to give you an idea of what we mean by this. 6. And then what I'm going to do is I'll just show you how these are different. So this can range from 1 to 6. So if I change this number here, it'll give you an idea. 6. And basically what it does is it gives us different header sizes. So 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I'll just save this. And then what I'll do is I'll refresh this. So when I refresh this, what it does is it refreshes the code. So basically the browser will reach out and get the code and then redisplay the code. So if I refresh it like so, so we can see here, so these are the header elements. So it's going from H1, which is the biggest one here. And then as you go down towards 6, the header size gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So it's useful depending on the type of header that you want to put in. If you need a big header or a small header, you can use these header elements. So they range from 1 to 6. And remember, we have the opening tag, which is this here at the front, and then we have the closing tag, which is this at the end, and then we have the content in the middle. And remember that both of these together, they make up what's called a HTML element. The next one then is the paragraph tags. Okay, that makes up a paragraph element. So if we have a look at our browser here, and we have a look at our web page, so this whole thing here, this whole section here, so this is a paragraph. So in order for us to be able to display this on the web page, we have to use these paragraph tags. Now there's other ways you can display text, like we can use headers, but when we want to display it as a paragraph. So if we have a look here, so this is an example of a paragraph element. So we have the opening tag, we have the closing tag, and then in the middle goes the contents for the paragraph. And this here, this HTML code displays like this on the browser. And again, it's used, so the paragraph element is used to display paragraphs on the browser, or display paragraphs for your web page. The next element then is the bold. So if we want to take a piece of text and make it bold or make it stand out. So let's say, for example, we have a look here at our website, or our web page, should I say, and we want to make this piece of text bold so that it stands out when it's displayed on the web page. We can use this bold, we can use this opening and closing bold text. So what we do is we put this opening and closing tag around the text that we want to make bold. So for example, if here's our paragraph in the HTML code, and we want to make this section, we want to make it bold. So we can use it. So we take our opening tag, so B, okay, like so. So this is the opening tag, and we want to take the closing tag, and we want to put this on the end here, like so. Okay, so we have this opening tag, closing tag, and then we have the words that we want to make bold in between the opening and closing tags. So if I save this and I refresh the code, so what will happen is here we can see that this is bold now. And this is an example of what's called an inline, so it's an inline piece of code. So and also as well, you can think about it as a nested piece of code as well. So we have this paragraph opening and closing tag, and then nested inside it, then we have this bold tag opening and closing. So again, that's what this does here. The next one is italicized. So again, it's very similar to this, except it just uses a different letter, and it italicizes any piece of text that you want to. So let's say I want to italicize, let's say this section here. So what I want to do is I need to find that piece of code, find that wording in my paragraph on my HTML code. So we can have a look and see where it is. Okay, so I think it goes from here all the way to here. So again, what I want to do is I want to use these tags either side of that word, that sentence, should I say, or that section of the sentence. So I have my opening I, and then I want to go as far as here, so my closing I, and then I want to save it, so Control and S, and then I want to, and we can see here that it's in italics. So that's what this guy here does. The next one that we want to look at is underline. So again, let's say we decide that we want to underline all this last piece here. So it'll just put a line underneath it. So we can use this underline tags. So again, we look for the piece of text that we want to underline. So that's this here. And then we can put in our opening and our closing tag. So we can put in U, like so. And then we can put this in under here. So we have our closing tag then. So Okay, so opening tag, closing tag, we want to control an S, save it, and we want to refresh the page. And we can see here that it underlines that piece of text. So this here then is what's called a break or a new line. So basically what this will do is it'll insert a new line. Now we have used some breaks, so we can see here that we have put some breaks in between the paragraphs to increase the space between the paragraphs. So basically what this does is it just gives you like a new line. So if we take, for example, imagine that we wanted to split this into two paragraphs, into two sections from here. Okay, so from, let's say here. So what we can do is we can put in a break. So we can do it like so. Backslash. So we can use the tag like that. And if I refresh this, okay, notice that it brings us down into a new line. So that's what this does. So I can put in as many as I want. Let's say if we put in another one. Like so. And we save that. So again, see it completely breaks. So we can put in as many new lines as we want, and we can use this element here. And notice the way, remember these break elements, or these are what are called void elements. So remember, they don't have any content. They're not like these other elements, like they have an open and close and tag, and then the content in the middle. So we have these void elements that don't have any content. They're void of content. And the last one then that we will look at is this guy here. So it's what's called a horizontal rule or line. So basically what this will do is it'll put a line right across the page that you put the code into. So it's useful for splitting up sections of a page. So let's say we wanted to put a line across here to separate this section from this section down here. We can use the horizontal line rule. So we just put it in. Again, it's a void element. There's no content in it. It just has like a closing tag, if you like. So we can put it in like so, and if I click save and then I refresh here, so again all this does is it puts a line across the page. Okay, like so. So again, this is useful if you want to split up sections. So let's say we want to like split this up into two sections. So I can go down here and I can go in here and put in my horizontal rule line like so. Save it and refresh it here. Okay, and then what that's doing is it's just putting in this horizontal line. So again, that's what's called a horizontal rule or line. So these are like some common HTML elements, and it just gives you an idea of the different types of elements that you have. Now there are a lot more elements than these, but as you can see, the basic structure of a web page can be developed just using these handful of basic HTML elements. Remember, HTML, it gives just the general structure or layout of the page. Now, if we wanted to start styling this and putting in colors and stuff like that, we would start to use CSS. But this is just the general kind of nuts and bolts, if you like, of just a simple what's called a static web page. It's not doing anything. It's just displaying information on a browser. So these are the common HTML elements. Now, we have what are called nested elements, and we've looked at some of these. So if we take an element nested inside another element, so for example, this here is what's called a nested element, and we've looked, so if we take this as a paragraph opening and closing tag, so it's I love pizza, and then we have this opening and closing bold tag here, and what that'll do is it'll display, if we want to copy this, it will display this on a web page. So if we have a look, we look at an example of that. So let's say I want to put that in here. Let's say I love pizza. So again, we can go up here and we can put in our paragraph. Okay, like so. And then we can say I love pizza. I love pizza. And if we save it and I just run it, okay, so it shows up here on the page. And then if I want to bold this love part, are bold tags. So just put the love part inside the bold tags. Save it and you can refresh. You can refresh it here. You can just refresh it on the page and notice that it bolded. So this is what an example of an inline element. So it's called inline because it's inside the. So it's, for example, this here is inside the paragraph element. So that is just some of the common elements that we use in HTML and inline elements. Okay, thank you for listening. So we want to look at what we mean by block level and inline elements. When you think about a HTML element, you can think about it as in it takes up space, for example, on when it's printed to the console. And the ways that these elements can be laid out are what are known as block and inline. So here are some of the common elements that we've already looked at, and then the type, whether they are block or whether they're a block level element or an inline element. So block level elements, you can think about them like this. So imagine each of these colors is an individual element, a block element. The elements, so these elements can be stacked regardless of their width. Okay, and what happens is they take up they stack like blocks. If we think about inline elements, so for example, some of these guys here, they are displayed inline. So instead of them being like this, like a block, they're like this. So they follow one after another. So inline elements flow from one line to the next. So let's look at some practical examples of that. So this is our IDE, Visual Studio Code, and this is the code, the simple web page that we developed in the previous lessons. So we're going to use this as an example to explain block level and inline elements. So we can run this code. So again, it's in HTML, so we can see here this is the name of it, and it has the .html extension. And when we're in Visual Studio Code, what we can do is we can run this by going to here, run. We can click on run without debugging. And then what will happen is that will run the page. And you can see here you have a little toolbar here that you can refresh the page, you can stop running the page or stop running this HTML, or you can pause it. So if I make this a little bit bigger, let me just get that again. Okay, so this is our web page. So this is our web page here. So we have a header, we have an image, so we have paragraphs, and then we have bold and underline elements in here on the web page. So here's our code, and then here is the web page. So I've just put them side by side so it's easy for you to follow along as we go through this. Now, what we can do as well, and just to introduce another concept as well that's very important, so we've looked at this HTML, and we have looked at it can give, like, let's say, the bare structure or bare bones of a website. Now, what I wanted to introduce to you now as well is what's called CSS. So CSS is what they're called cascading style sheets. So basically what they do is they allow us to introduce style, if you like, into the web page. So it allows us to underline, it allows us to introduce like color and different styling of the different elements that are on your web page. Now what we're going to do, I'm going to use this to explain the concept of block level and inline elements. So in order to style your page, what you have to do is you have to create a link. So if we have a look here, so this here is what's called a CSS link. So it's an element, and we place it inside the header or the head of our HTML. And in this, we have the link with the opening and closing bracket. We have the relationship, this rel is equal to, and what that means is that it's how it relates to this particular page that this link is on. So it relates to the page in that it's a style sheet, it's a CSS style sheet. And then here we have the reference or horizontal reference. So this is the reference or the file that will contain the styling elements or the CSS elements. And notice it's called style, and then it has the .css, which indicates that it's a CSS file. So what we have to do then is, in order to be able to introduce some CSS code into this, we have to create a style.css document. So we can do that here. So we can go up here and we can create a new file, and we can call it style.css, and then just hit enter. And what that will do is it will create this style sheet, and we want to look at it. So let me just close this for 1 second. And this is our style sheet here, and we want to open it to the side. So we want to have it open beside our HTML document. So we have the two of these open here, like so. So now what we can do is, so let's say if we look at these, let's say we look at this element here. Okay, so that it's a header element, and this is the corresponding HTML for that header element. Now, if I want to style this element, what I have to do is I have to target it or select it. I have to be able to reach out to it and touch it. Okay, so we use our style.css file for this. So what we do is, first of all, we create so this is a h1 element, and what we want to do is we want to create a link between this h1 element and the style that we want to apply to it. So how do we do that? So in our style sheet, we just type h1. So what this style will do is it will target any h1 elements that are in this HTML document. And then we have an open and close curly brace like so. Okay, and then inside this, then we put the CSS code or the styling code that we want to apply to this element. And we can just do Control and S, and that will save what we do. So let's say I want to add a border around this, so I can type in border. Okay, so notice that all you have to do is type it in, and it will pre-fill. And we want to give the border a size, so we'll say, let's say 2 pixels. We want to make it a solid, so we can make it solid. So ID, so we can make it a solid, like a solid line. And then we want to create the color. Let's say we just make it red like so. Okay, so this is styling. So this is a styling tag, if you like, and it's targeting all the h1 elements. So there's only one in our web page, and it's applying this particular style to it. So it's putting a border around it. It's making the border 2 pixels thick. It's solid, and it's going to be red in color. So if I click Control and S and save this, and if I refresh the page, so what we can see here is that we have this border that we've put around this element. Now, if we remember as well, we were talking about block and inline elements. So the h1 element, or the header element, it's a block level element. So it's a block level element. So what does that mean in simple terms? Well, you can think about this element here. This is the space that it takes up. So it just appears as a block. So just one big long block. So if I extend this, we notice that the borders, if you like, or the element itself, it extends and covers up the whole width of the page. So if we think about block level elements, if I put in another header element, it's going to go underneath this. So in other words, block level elements, they stack on top of each other. So just to kind of demonstrate this, let's say if I was to take this header element and I was to create, let's say just copy this, and I was to put it on the same line, for example, like so. Just do it like this. Okay, and then if I hit save, Control and S, and then refresh. So it's not being put to one side of it, it's stacking on top of the one that's already there, even though they appear like this in the HTML. Block level elements will stack on top of each other like so. Okay, so that's an example of that. If we think about as well, so what are the other block level elements? So if we think about the paragraph tags, okay, so paragraphs, they're going to be block level. They're going to they're going to behave exactly the same way as H1 elements. And then also as well this horizontal ruler or horizontal line that we looked at. So let's have a look at those. So if we have a look here, we have a couple of paragraphs, and if I apply, so let's say I want to style it, so I write P to target, so I write the letter or the name of the element. I put my curly brackets like so, and I want to, I'll just copy and paste this. So I want to apply a red border to these as well. Okay, and then I Control and S, and I can click this button here, or I can click this, whichever, and refresh. So we can see now what happens is it puts a border around all of the paragraph elements. And notice that these are block elements. Okay, so they appear as a block. They span the page, and they also stack on top of each other. Also as well, if we want to target these guys here, so HR, so we put in the name of the element, we put in our curly brackets, and then I can control, so just paste this in here, and then click refresh, and what it does is it's drawn a border, a red border around these horizontal elements. And notice the way that they are spanning across the page. Okay, so if you try and put these on the same line, what's going to happen is one will go on top of the other. You can't put them, if you like, beside each other. So that's what we mean by block level elements, and that they stack on top of each other. Now the opposite of that are these what are called inline elements. So if we look at, so for example, this here is for bolding text, this is for putting it in italics, and this is for underlining it, and these are what are called page breaks, or they create new lines. So if we have a look at these and how they appear differently than, and these are inline elements and how they are different than the block level elements that we've looked at. So if we have a look at here, so if we look in the text, so we can see here that here we have this section here is in bold. Okay, and if we look here, so this is the corresponding HTML that makes that bold. Now what I can do is I can apply some style to that. Okay, so I can style it. So in order for me to apply style or CSS, I have to first of all target the element. So I write in the name of the element. Okay, so it's B in this case, and so it's just B just for bold. We'll put in our curly brackets like so, and this time we're going to apply a border around it like so, and we'll just make this, instead of making it red, we'll just make it blue like that. If I Control and S and save it, and then if I refresh this, so now we can see that we have put a border around this element, and what we can see that is that the bolden element, it's an inline element, so we can see that it's inline. So it's inline. For example, we can put these beside each other one after another. So for example, what I can do here, if I was to, let's say, bold these two words here, so let me just put this in here like so. So imagine, and if I just cut this here and put it in, so we're just bolding another part of the, if I save this and just refresh, so I've applied some HTML in here, and I refresh it. So what it does is it bolds this part here, and what we can see is that inline elements, they can be put beside each other, so that they basically, instead of stacking on top of each other like the block level elements, these elements they go one after another. You can put them beside each other like so. So if we have a look, let's have a look down here, and if we take here, for example, so these guys, so this is all underlined, and again, this is an example of the underline tag, which is here. So that's all of this here, from here to here. So this underline tag, so this is an inline element as well. And if we add some CSS style into that and save, and we'll see that, sorry, no, it's not UL, it's just U. So I'm going to save that and then refresh. So we can see here that So this is an example of an inline element as well. So again, if I was to, let's say, take this piece of text here, and if I was to underline that, like so, if I just take this, so that you have the opening tag and then you have the closing tag, these out. And if I was to put that, let's say just here like that, and then save that, so we're underlining this part here that's in front of this line, and we can see here that it appears on the same line. So again, this is the difference between what are known as block level elements and then inline elements. It's the way that they stack on the page. So again, this is what we mean when we talk about block level elements. You can stack them on top of each other like so. When we are talking about inline elements, they appear one after another, and they appear like so when you put them onto the page. So block level elements are stacked on top of each other. Inline elements, so if you think about things like these elements will be inline, for example, with other elements as well. If you think about when you're bolding or when you're putting in italics or you're underlining, there that style is going to be in line with the elements that you're applying that style to. So that is block level and inline elements. And also in this lesson, I've introduced you to like how to apply a style sheet. So this is the link element, and this is the how you, if you like, link a HTML file to a CSS file. Let me just CSS file. Let me just move this out of the way. So this is our CSS file. It has this extension .css. This has the extension .html. In order to apply style to a particular element, you have to use these tags, like so. So you can put in the name of the element that you want to target, and then you put in your curly brackets, and then inside this you can apply all the style that you want to apply to those particular elements. Now there's other ways that you can link in with the HTML elements, and we look at that in subsequent lessons. But this is just an introduction, just how you can apply CSS to a HTML file like so. So hopefully you found that interesting, and thank you for listening. Okay, so in this lesson we are going to continue on, and we're going to look at commenting in HTML, and then we're going to look at some of the HTML special characters. So the first thing we look at is the commenting in HTML. So if we want to, so when we write code, so this is the code that we've written for a brief history of the internet, or history of the internet. So we have our HTML file here, and we have our CSS file here that applies style to the HTML file. So what we might want to do is, after a while, code can get very, very complex. So in order to make it easy when you revisit that file, let's say after a couple of days, what you need to be able to do is you can put in comments, for example. So if I want to include a comment, so I can put in a comment here like so. This is the style that we use here. So we use this type of style here. So if I copy this, and I'll just put it in here. So we can see here that this shows up as this just shows up as a comment. So we can put this in as a comment. So just to show you then, so if we put in this like so, and then we can just double tap like that, and there should be an extra in there like so. Okay, so that's what you have to do, and then what you do is you put your comment in here. Okay, so whatever the comment is, so you can say something like this section is the code for the image on the web page. Okay, so it looks something like that. And what we can do now is we can run this. So I'll just refresh the page. And if we have a look at our web page, so we can see that that code doesn't show or doesn't display anywhere here on the web page. So this is just the page that we were previously looking at. Now, also what you can do as well, you can comment out sections. So let's just say I wanted to, let's say, get rid of one of these sections. I don't want to delete all the code, but I just want to kind of get rid of it. We can do what's called commenting it out. So I can select, how you do this is you select, so highlight the code that you want to comment out, press Control, and then hit the / button, okay, like so. And what that will do is it will comment out the code. And if I refresh this, we can see that the header is gone. If I want to get that code back, I can Control and / and it'll bring the code back like so. So this is a way that you can turn on and off, if you like, pieces of code on your HTML file. Now, this was style that we applied when we were looking at like inline and line blocks. So what I can do is, in order to turn off this style on the style.css page, I can select all this piece of code here like so, and then I can press Control and / and that will, what that does is it essentially comments out all of the code. And if I refresh this, it'll get rid of the CSS style that I applied to this site. Now, what I want to do now as well is I want to comment out this because we don't want two headings, and I can press Control and / like so, and what that will do is it'll reset that like that. So that's the use of comments. So we can apply comments into our HTML code, and this just makes it easy for us to understand what each part of the code, what it's for. So code inevitably becomes very complicated, and we can also use it to comment out pieces of code. So the next thing we want to look at are these what are called special characters. So we might at some point, so there's code, if you like, for all of the different types of special characters that we want to include. So let's say if I put in a paragraph, let's say we put it up here at the top. So I want to put in a paragraph. So we have the opening and closing tag of the paragraph, and I want to write in here. So the cost of tea in Ireland is, and let's say we want to put in €3, like so. So in order to put in this euro symbol, we can use these what are called HTML special characters. So they start with an ampersand. This is like this and symbol. So we can just select this code like that, copy it, and then I can put that in here in front of the tree. It's in front of the tree like so. Let me just make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so what that will do is it will put in the euro symbol in here like so. So if I save this and if I refresh my page, so let's have a look at the page. So we can see here that it has put in that euro symbol there like that. Okay, so these are what are called special characters. So if we have a look at some of the other special characters, if I want to include a fraction, so let's say we put in another paragraph here. So the cost. So the cost is, let's say, a fraction. Let's say if we want to say it's a quarter of the price, we would use this special character here. So it is a quarter of the price in the UK. Okay, so we'll just save that like so, and this here is going to put in a fraction. And so you can see here it's putting in the fraction like so. Now if we look at this, so all of these HTML special characters, they start with an ampersand or an and sign, and they have fraction in it, and then they have the number that goes on the top is the first number, the number that goes on the bottom is the second number, like so. Okay, so it looks something like that. If we wanted to include, if we want to put in like division signs, so let's say we want to have a quarter divided by a quarter. So if I do something like this, and let's just put in a new half, like so. So this is not that. I will put in this here. So let's say we want to do a quarter divided by a quarter. So we put in, so that's the quarter sign, and then we want another one as well. And then in between that, then we want the division. So this here is the HTML code to put in this divider sign. We'll put that in like so, like that. Let me just have this on beside each other like so. And if I Control and S to save it, and then I press this to refresh. And if we have a look here, so we can see here that puts in these special characters, a half divided by a quarter. So there's HTML code for all of these different types of special characters, and this is what it looks like. And we have this web page here. I'll just show you the web page. So there's all different types of special characters that at some point you might want to include on your website. And the way to do it is to use these what are called HTML special characters, or HTML code for those special characters. So if we have a look at this website here, I can just put it in here like so. And this web page will give you all the different types of special characters. So here we have, and you can put in either of these, this or this. This is just a description of it, and then this is the character. So these are other characters as well that you can put in. So let's say we want to put in this special character here. All I have to do is I can copy either of these, this one or this one. So if we do this, copy, and I put it into, so let's say I'll just put it in here, and I'll put it on the side there, and I press save, and I refresh my page. And we go in here, so you can see there that it's including that on my web page. Let's have a look at some other ones. Okay, so if there's any amount here, so I would recommend that you go in and have a look around in here. So let's say we want to use this special symbol here. So again, you can use either of these. Just copy it, and then I can put it in here, and then I save it. So I'm putting it into my HTML file, like so. And then we can see there that it shows up on the web page. So that's just a way at introducing these what are called special characters. And if we have a look on here, we can see that we have all different types. We've Greek characters, we've all of these symbols here. So I would recommend just going on and having a look at that website, and it'll give you any of these special characters that you need. Okay, so that's just two more tools that you can add to your web development toolbox. So how to add comments, and then how to add in special characters like these guys here. Okay, thank you for listening. So I want to talk a little bit about this thing called metadata. So metadata is information about a particular website, and it typically doesn't show up like on the display on the website. It's kind of in the background, if you like, but it's linked in with a particular website, and it's normally contained in between the head elements. So if we have a look at our web page that we previously built, so this is it here. So this is just the HTML for it. So in the HTML, you have all the metadata is going to be contained inside this head element. So there'll be information inside here that we will call metadata, and it gives just additional information about the website. So one piece of metadata that does show up on the page or on the tab is this title page. Okay, so the history of the internet. So if we run our web page, so if we go up here and go to run and go to run without debugging. Let me just get rid of this here. 1 second now. Okay, so you just go to run without debugging. And we can see here that this is our web page here. And we can see up here, this is the title that shows up. So this would be a piece of metadata. Here we have a link to a style sheet. So again, this is another piece of metadata. So this links back to the style sheet that we used in the previous exercise. We were going to be looking at CSS in more detail, but again, in order for, if we want to apply style to this particular web page that we developed, we use this link. So we link to a style sheet and we give the name of the style sheet as well. Now, if I was to leave out this, let's say if I was to take out this title here, so I'll just copy and paste it out, and I'll just save this, and then I'll refresh the page. So if we take out the title and we refresh this page, so notice that it gets rid of the title and it just puts in the name of the HTML file here. So I can put this title back in, and I can save it and refresh. And again, we have this title back in here. Another common piece of metadata that you will see in the title is this here, and we'll talk about what this means in subsequent lessons, is this character set. And if we take, for example, a piece of metadata or even a HTML element, so we can call all of this here an attribute. So with an attribute, you'll have the name of the attribute, in this case character set, and then you'll have the value that's associated with the attribute then as well. Another piece of metadata that you can put into your website is the author who created the website. So you can have that contained in the metadata. So again, if we think about this here, for example, if I refresh this and we have a look at our web page, this piece of information isn't shown up here on the web page. So in order to see it, you would have to go in here, go to inspect. You would have to go in here into the head, and then you can get the contents in here. So you can. So it's this like piece of metadata that you would look at. So again, it's not visible to on the particular page. Another piece of metadata that you might put in as well is the name, for example. You might give a description of the website, and you could say, for example, my first website, or depending on the particular website that you build, you might put in a description of the website. You can also include metadata such as keywords. So for example, you can put in things like first web page, HTML, podcast logo Ireland. So you can include keywords so that when somebody searches on Google, your web page will be associated with particular keywords that people would search for. So it means that it makes it more likely that your web page would show up. For example, if somebody was to type in my first web page, HTML Ireland, the Google browsers, for example, or the internet browsers that the person is using would link them back more easily than to your particular web page. So we have this metadata for keywords included in here as well. So that is metadata. So again, contained in the header elements, things like the title. We can have metadata about the name, who created the web page, what the web page is about, the character set that is used in the web page. Again, we look at what this means in more detail in later lessons. And you can include, keywords such as my first web page, HTML, Jane Brown, whatever it is that you want the Google engine to search and associate with your particular website. And it may mean that you get more hits, for example, or more views on your web page. So that is metadata, and the important thing is to know in relation to this is that the metadata is contained in here inside the head element, the header section of the web page, and generally that information bar, for example, the title, it doesn't show up on the particular web page itself when it's displayed. You have to actually go into the code, for example, to be able to have a look at this metadata and get this metadata which is contained inside here. Okay, so that's metadata. Thank you for listening.